Alright, so we are on day 11. We are here at this Somerset Place is what it's called? Or Palace? Somerset Place, which is a historical plantation, and just here in North Carolina, close to Columbia. We're about 9 miles away from there. And yeah, we were able to preserve this old plantation with history of what it was like here in the South. So I'm gonna walk around and explore and have a good day. See the stocks right there. Okay. And then D is a lake chapel. So that used to be a chapel. Okay. It's a protected area. You can see the foundations and the stones where it still was. Plantation Hospital provided the medical treatment for the sick and injured members of the enslaved community. White physicians who attended the owners also attended the enslaved people in this building. Original Plantation Hospital, 1920, 1940.
Yep, so it's built the same way the other building would have been used for, except this one, instead of being a home, is a hospital. And so this is where sick, enslaved individuals would come to be treated, or just simply isolated. The Collins family themselves would have never really seen the inside of this building. As typical for white families, they'd be treated inside their own home. But the same hired white doctors, such as Dr. Hardison and Dr. Warren, who would have treated the Collins family in their home, would have also treated enslaved patients here in the Plantation Hospital. These doctors did not live here on site, but they would have come in as needed, and they were paid one price per visit. It did not matter how many patients they saw or what types of treatments were provided. And so because of that, a lot was just simply never written down. And so we do have a pretty limited knowledge of everything that would have taken place in the hospital. We do know that they operated under what is known as the miasma theory. Do you know what the miasma theory is? So the miasma theory suggests that diseases come from bad air. Of course, this is a swamp, so there is plenty of bad air to go around, and they believe that that was the reason that these people were getting sick. In reality, it was things such as cholera, spread by unclean drinking water, smallpox that runs rampantly through close quarters, and yellow fever and malaria, which are spread by mosquitoes. Common practices at this time included purging and bloodletting. Purging used a medication called castor oil, which is very bitter and hard to swallow. And so doctors would put it inside this Gibson spoon, which could be placed at the back of a patient's mouth so they could swallow it without tasting it. However, as the name suggests, the patient would then purge or throw out their stomach contents. And so while this helped on the way in, not so much on the way out. Bloodletting used small glasses such as these, heated up and placed on the skin in order to draw blood to the surface, much like modern carping practices today. However, it would then be followed up by using small knives such as these, or this device known as a scarificator, in which many small blades rotate through, causing many cuts, hoping that the blood being let from those wounds would heal the patient of whatever was making them sick. It's important to keep in mind that while these don't sound like great practices to us today, these were considered to be the best of the best at the time. However, years of medical advancements tells us that bloodletting was actually what killed our first president, George Washington. We also know that it wasn't just hired white doctors working here within the Plantation Hospital, but also enslaved women. One enslaved woman named Chloe Drew, who was enslaved here at Somerset for some time before being sold to a neighboring plantation owned by the Pettigrew family, returned on several occasions after being sold to serve as a midwife for more difficult childbirths, both here within the Plantation Hospital, as well as within women's homes. Dentistry was also coming into its own practice in the mid-1800s, and dentists were hired on 2 different occasions to do work here at Somerset Place. This suggests that doctors did not do dental work on their own. And they would have used a kit very similar to this, which does include a tooth key, which is used for teeth extractions. As I mentioned before, we don't have a great idea of exactly everything that took place in the plantation hospital. But one of the surgeries that we do know is a double amputation. And this double amputation came about because of Christmas passes. And what those are is another type of reward given to select few enslaved individuals, a small slip of paper allowing them to leave Somerset Place between Christmas and New Year to visit family members on other Collins property located in Edenton. For whatever reason, in 1845, Josiah does not give out any of these passes, and a young enslaved woman named Rebecca Drew decides that she's going to try to visit her family anyway. She is captured and returned to the plantation, where the overseer decides that her punishment is to be placed in stocks overnight. It does get bitterly cold here at the end of December, especially overnight, and by the time they retrieved her in the morning, both of her feet were suffering from frostbite. And so she was brought to the hospital, where the doctor would have decided almost immediately that the only way to save her life would be to amputate both of her feet. And this was a time where anesthetics were not yet used in surgery, so she likely would have been awake going into it. But not only does she survive the surgery, she survives the recovery period where infection claimed most of its victims. After recovering, she does return to working here at Somerset Place. She has children, she gets married, and she lives to see emancipation in 1865, where she moves to Edenton to become a housekeeper. And in 1901 is when she passes away, and so we see that she lives a fairly long life. And so we see that not only is this a testament to the strength and willpower of Rebecca Drew herself, but also a testament to some of the more horrific things that enslaved individuals were forced to be put through. Any questions?
So obviously this had fake feet they had paid for, prosthetics so she could
So her amputation was what we refer to as mid-tibial. So best we could tell, it was somewhere in the middle of her shin, leaving just enough of that bottom part of her leg left behind for her to walk around on her knees.
Why is the fire pit black?
Why is it black?
Fire.
Because when they had a fire in there, it left behind a lot of soot.
Okay.
Yeah, that is.
That's our baby school.
No.
Would it be one physician, or was there like some assistants too?
So for the most part, it would just be the one doctor. On occasion, one or two might have been hired in the case of larger outbreaks.
Those are splints.
Yeah, these is what we call a fracture box. So you put the broken leg here in the box, and they tie it so they couldn't move their leg, and they would have to lay here in bed until it healed. So for 4 to 6 weeks, they'd have to lay in one spot.
We could not move.
What
And
did
see,
you
that
guys
one's
do?
smaller for a smaller leg. And this one's for a bigger leg. That's like a boot, which I walked around in when I broke my leg.
Yeah, but you can't move.
Yeah, these ones let me move. Wouldn't let you move. Mine let me move.
Why do these ones not let you move?
Because it wasn't quite as stable as modern boots or casts that we use today. This was a lot bulkier, and as you can see, they kind of could have just put pressure on the ties here, which meant that they would move it a little bit. And if they moved their leg just a little bit, it could mean that the break didn't heal straight.
You see the wooden pegs on the construction, how they build it. They use wooden pegs instead of nails.
Corbin.
Hey, don't touch.
Just extra rooms, yeah.
What happened, Batman? Did it break the water bottle?
Open.
Over dry tires. I dropped it with it on, but
building is the dairy. This building is pretty uncommon for this region, especially because of the climate here in this area. But it was used to keep items such as milk, eggs, butter, cheeses, and even sometimes lards cool, preserve them for just a little bit longer. The louvered windows allow that cool breeze to come in off the lake, but it also keeps out any of the direct sunlight from coming into the building. The brick nogging, which you can see there in the corner, would have provided a layer of insulation to this building, helping to keep it cool. Common items found within this building would have been butter churns, butter molds, cheese boxes, and even the hooks here on the ceiling used to hang soft cheeses. Any questions?
And how old is this building here?
This dates back to about the 1830s.
1800s.
And this is like a butter churn, just.
It is, yep. It's called a swing frame butter churn.
Why is there no lights in here?
It's old.
No lights? Well, because in the 1840s, they didn't have any electricity, which meant the only way they lit up buildings was with candles,
And torches?
sometimes. But they wouldn't have had any candles in here because fire is very hot, and they wanted to keep this room really cold. We're on the laundry side. This is where enslaved women such as Annette Baum and Rebecca Horton would have done the laundry for the Collins family and their guests. Laundry at this time was done pretty infrequently, and it was done about once a week. Water would be boiled outside, and it would be brought in to wash smaller items such as collars of men's shirts, aprons, and baby clothes. Larger items such as dresses and bedding would be washed outside where they just simply had more room to do so. In this room they would also mend any items of clothing that needed it, and they would also iron clothing. And so the individuals on this property that had iron clothes were not only the Collins family and their guests, but also the enslaved domestic workers due to their proximity to the house. They would heat up large heavy cast iron irons such as this. This one's about 25 pounds. Over hot embers, and they would wrap their hands in cloth in order to just be able to pick this up. And they would have to work very fast in order to make sure that they didn't burn anything that they were working on. And so we see that their work here was both very hot and very hard labor. If you guys would like, you're more than welcome to come try to pick this up. You do just have to pick it up over the table, okay? Don't smush any toes. Wow, you're strong.
That's fine. I can hold a 25-pound weight.
Wow.
Okay, over the table. Okay. Are you gonna try, Corbin?
Good try.
All right, 2 hands.
Okay.
Keep it over the table. Good job.
Good, Corbin.
Awesome. Anyone have any questions?
I'm a weight master.
This is the kitchen side. This is where enslaved cooks Grace Bennett and Levy Cabarrus Harvey would have worked. And they would have worked all day in order to primarily prepare just one meal for the Collins family, and that meal was dinner. Dinner at this time was served at about 3 p.m. It was made up of about 6 courses with anywhere between 5 to 10 dishes per course. So it really would take them all day to prepare just the one meal. Cooking was done over both open flames and hot embers using devices like cast iron Dutch ovens, skillets, and even waffle irons. These women had to work extremely close to this heat source, ensuring that none of the food items burned. And so we see that their work on the side would also be extremely hot, working in this building close to a fire. Any questions?
What are those?
So these are called spiders. And so what you would do is you put hot embers under these, and then you put your frying pan right here on top, and the hot embers underneath would heat up that frying pan.
Okay. And the further down it is, you probably don't want to look at that.
You have to say that one more time.
The closer it is to the ground.
Does that make it hotter?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Because
then,
it's closer to the embers.
yeah, so being closer to the embers would make it hotter. You could also stack the embers up higher. So even if you were using this one, which is pretty tall, you could put the embers up in a higher pile and make it hotter as well.
Yeah, if you put it in a tiny pile, that means pile, you would have a tiny when you cooked.
So how did they do it when they had to cook all day, but they also had their laundry day? Did they have more people to help them with the
So it
laundry?
was 2 different sets of women.
Okay.
And They would kind of be working in and out of this building. Would have constantly been busy. We see that even though laundry wasn't done as frequently, it mostly rotated, so maybe one person's clothes was washed on one day, bedding might be washed another day. And then with cooking, the fires here would be constantly going. Somebody would have to stay and keep an eye on those, make sure they didn't go out. And so this would have been a very busy building.
We want to keep it warm. That room would be very hot.
Yes. Bricks are slippery.
This is kind of what I want to do in our backyard at the river house. These old gardens like this.
Yeah. With your Greek gods?
Mm-hmm.
This garden here is to be resemblant of formal English estates, where the house sits on a hill flanked by the gardens and then the orchard. Of course, no hills here in northeast North Carolina, but the Collins family home does sit on the highest land of the property. The garden itself would be overseen by Mary Collins, and as the wife of a wealthy planter, she was very interested in the aspects of gardening. She loved to read about gardening. She would have purchased all the plants that would have been here in the garden. But when it came down to it, it was enslaved gardeners such as Fred Littlejohn who were doing all the work here within the garden to keep it up to her expectations.
Yeah.
There's a picture. We'll catch it. That's
That's too many vines.
Ryan and Jade and Mom. We took a picture. We're standing inside of it.
Check that
Oh,
one
wow.
right there.
Kind of hollowed out.
Let's walk correctly so we don't fall. Turn around and walk correctly.
Don't get too close. Alrighty, this is the transportation canal. This canal is 6 miles long. It stretches all the way from Lake Phelps to the Scuppernong River. At its deepest point, it is about 12 feet deep. And this canal was dug for 3 primary reasons. The first reason was to drain the land of all of the excess water, which it still does to this day. It also was used as transportation for large flat-bottom boats, which could move the cash crops from this plantation to larger ships on the Scuppernong River. The third reason was that it could provide water power to both the saw and grist mill located just down the road from here. We see that this canal was the project assigned to the 80 enslaved Native West Africans who were brought to Somerset Place in 1786. They were chosen for this job because it was said that African individuals were more resistant to malaria. These individuals were worked so hard that a project that was proposed to take 5 years to complete was completed in 2.5 years. Alright, so we do see that they had very harsh working conditions here, sometimes up to waist deep water, mud, and muck. And they also were exposed to things such as mosquitoes as well as venomous snakes here in this area. Wouldn't have been this cool in the 1840s, but we do have air conditioning now.
Ah, okay.
And I will apologize now. I do tend to lose my voice about halfway through the house, so please bear with me. Alright, so the first one we're going to talk about right now is the entrance hallway here that we're standing in. This room is the first room that guests would see as they were arriving into the house, and so it is decorated as such. We see features such as the archway, the chandelier, and even the hand-painted faux marble baseboards. The first floor of the house is the most intricate floor because this is the only floor that guests would see unless they were staying overnight. This hallway, which is a room not used for any particular living space at all, was more square footage than any of the living spaces provided to the enslaved community. Right off the hallway here we do have the parlor. The parlor is where all formal hosting was done by the Collins family. All of their children were trained to play piano, and so they hosted musical recitals here. They also hosted something called reading circles, in which their neighbors often attended in order to escape their own day-to-day lives. And we say this because of letters between the Pettigrew family that discuss how dull and boring Josiah was during these reading circles. And in one letter, he even suggests that the Collins family give up reading for Lent. The next room here is the library. This is the room where the Collins family showed off both their wealth as well as their formal education. Books at this time were considered to be a luxury, and the Collins family owned about 3,000 of them. That's about 2,999 more books than the typical North Carolina family owned. Most families at this time only owned a Bible, and Bibles were passed on from generation to generation, used to keep track of important dates such as births, deaths, and marriages. In the library above the mantel, you'll notice a portrait of Josiah Collins IV. In that portrait, he is wearing his Confederate uniform, and he is the oldest son of Mary and Josiah. On the table, you'll notice a small book with a little bit of the gold leafing left on its pages. That is a book of common prayer that belonged to Arthur Collins, the youngest son of Mary and Josiah.
Yeah.
Any questions before we continue on?
Yes. Why is God so important that they give it away?
Why do
For reading.
the Bible, you mean?
No, the lead.
Oh,
Why do they give?
the joke she made earlier.
Oh, to give up reading for Lent?
So what, you have to learn what Lent is. Maybe that will help you understand. Okay, so Lent.
Lent is a religious tradition. I believe it's Catholic. And essentially for Lent, you give up one bad habit. So if maybe you drank too much soda, you'd give up drinking soda for Lent. It was supposed to be a way for you to give up bad habits. And so the Pettigrew family was saying that reading here by the Collins family was a bad habit for them, and so they should give it up.
Do you understand now?
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions before we continue on? Alrighty, we'll head into the office next.
I know.
So the office here is a room of power for Josiah because not only did he store all of the business records pertaining to the plantation here in this room, but this is also where he would make daily business decisions, including those about the lives of the enslaved in which they had no say over. Josiah was an avid record keeper. He kept track of things such as the temperature at 3 different points of the day, crop prices and rotations, and even the number of enslaved individuals assigned to each and every task to ensure that no labor was wasted. So we do see that he is a very profit and business-driven man. If you look closely at the documents here around the table, you may notice that they are in 2 different handwritings. And that is because Josiah did not work in this room alone. He did have a secretary, and that was his wife Mary, and so the two would have worked in this room alongside of each other. Original pieces in this room do include the 4 chairs, this stack of book here, the pistol cover here, which would have belonged to George Collins, another son of Mary and Josiah, and above the mantel, the portrait of Josiah Collins I. Any questions before we continue on?
Yes. Are those, what's this doing here?
So those, I don't know what type of bird they are, but they are what we call taxidermy. So essentially they are stuffed and then they are put on display. And so they would have had items similar to this when the Collins family lived here, as well as the ducks that you see down here on the floor.
So they're real ducks, but they kill them and then stuff them.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so this is where enslaved butler Luke Davis, grandson of Suki Davis, would have worked alongside of enslaved house servant Penny Gossam. Food would be brought from the kitchen, the building that we were just in, through the butler's door here. So this window opens up and the panels open in, so they'd be able to come in through this way. They would plate the food here in this room before serving it in the formal dining room just across the hall. This room also served as the dining area for enslaved house servants, and so they would take their meals here. It also was their staging area, and so what that means is if at any point they weren't working on a specific task, they would wait here for somebody to assign one to them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
There's the break room.
Mm-hmm.
The break room.
Yep. Out this window here you can see what we refer to as the service porch. The service porch is 2 levels, and this was used by enslaved house servants. They were not allowed to use the front door of the house or use the grand staircase, and so in order to enter the home to do their work, they had to use the side doors on both floors. This also applied to hired workers though. If an overseer needed to discuss business with Josiah, he would knock on the side door and enter the office through the butler's pantry. The only original piece here in this room is the table in the corner. Any questions?
It's like that door has a panel on the bottom.
Yes. So it's a butler's door, so the window
Okay,
opens up,
I got
and the panels open in.
I see.
Did dogs live here?
The dogs live here. So, okay, I don't know if any dogs lived here in this building, but do you remember the building that you were in to pay for the tour? The building that's right over there? 25 dogs lived in that building at one time, and 2 monkeys.
What a mess.
2 monkeys.
And then 25 dogs. That's a lot of dogs.
Yep, 25 pot hounds and 2 monkeys.
Corbin, do you want that many dogs?
Monkeys? Yes.
Yeah, monkeys.
Yes.
Why were there monkeys?
Because somebody had given them as a gift to the children of the Collins family.
Yeah, they did a good job with the faux marble book.
So that room that you're seeing there off to the side, that would have originally been a guest room. Pretty much served as a guest room the entire time this house was owned by the Collins family.
Let's see. I have things
The hallway here, second floor hallway, just as big as the one downstairs, but definitely less decorative. We no longer have the faux marble baseboard here. We don't have any archways or any chandeliers here in this hallway. The second floor was much more intimate. Only overnight guests of the Collins family would have seen this floor. An overnight guest at this point meant that you were staying for weeks or months at a time, especially because of how isolated this area was, and the nearest city of Edenton being a full day's trip away. The linen cabinet here is an original piece, and it was used to store both summer and winter bedding, as well as mosquito netting for those warmer months. Alrighty, so this is another room of power for Mary and Josiah, and that is because of the 5 windows here in this room. They'd be able to look out any of these windows and get a pretty good idea of exactly what was happening on the plantation. And this meant that they were able to keep a very close eye on everything, make sure everything was happening to their expectations. Original pieces here in this room do include the bed, the side table, and the vanity. The smallest book on the stack there, as well as our portraits of Mary and Josiah. Came from
So this
besides
is
other states.
Many of your friends.
We're talking about the
this is
closet.
heart pine floor.
Yes, the floor is heart pine. The floor here is, I would say, about 98% original. There are a few places like this where it had to be patched. In fact, there actually used to be a wall here. So in the early 90s, they wanted to turn this house into a hunting and fishing lodge. And so they put in modern facilities like bathrooms, and this is where they put one in. And so they put a wall here. The state came in, started restoring the property, and they had to take the wall back out.
So it's been returned back to its original.
Yes, there were only minor changes done, like putting in a bathroom, but everything else was reverted back to what it was. This room here, we call the room we know not, because there is no documentation that tells us what this room was used for. So we've interpreted it in a couple of different ways. For example, we do know that Mary nursed all 6 of her children, all on her own, which is very uncommon for a wealthy white woman at this time. And so perhaps it was a nursery that she used to do that. We also know that a woman lived here in the room behind me, and Mary lived just across the hall, and so perhaps it could have been used as the woman's dressing room. All of the sitting areas downstairs are very formal, and so this could have been a more relaxed seating environment for the family to play games or work on sewing projects, or any combination of those three things. Above the mantel here is what is referred to as a sampler. This was part of a woman's formal education, and this one was completed by Anne Daves Collins, the oldest sister of Josiah III. She would have completed this to show off both the intricate sewing techniques that she learned, as well as her ABCs and her numbers, and her portraits, since they're on the mantel. It is referred to as a chamber pot. So a bedroom at this time was called a chamber, and it's a pot in the chamber to use the bathroom. And they would use these at night because they didn't want to go outside in the dark when all of the wild animals were outside. And so they would use the chamber pot, and then the enslaved house servants would come and clean it out and empty it.
Every morning and night.
Yeah.
Do you want to have that job? No.
Right, so I mentioned that a woman lived here in this building, this room, sorry. And this woman was Alethea Collins. Alethea is the youngest sister of Josiah III, and at the time of their father's death, she was only 15 years old. And so she moved from the family home in Edenton to come live with her brother because he became her legal guardian. She would have lived in this room until she reached adulthood, and then would have continued to use this room as she came back to visit the family. Alethea was wealthy, inheriting both money and property from her father, and that included enslaved individuals. However, she did not use these enslaved individuals to create a new plantation like her older sister Louisa did. Instead, she rented these enslaved individuals to her brother. That means that they lived and worked here at Somerset Place, and Alethea was paid for the work that they did. She used that money to then travel the world, which is what she loved to do during her young adult years. And while she had many suitors at that time, marriage was not yet on her mind. In fact, she didn't get married until just 4 days shy of her 39th birthday. That was incredibly late for a woman at this time. But she does marry one of the wealthiest men in the state, a man named Dr. Thomas Warren, and he owned a home even larger than this one located in Edenton, and that is the Wessington House. And so after they were married, that's where she moved. Any questions?
Is the Wessington house still around?
It is still around. It is privately owned, but you can see it from the street. That never comes to be, but on that shelf there just inside the door, you'll see a large Bible, and that was a wedding present to the couple. And then when you're ready, we'll head up to the next floor.
It's crazy to think that the main entrance is on the side of the house instead of being like on the front.
So who do you think lived here in this room? All the kids, right. So Mary and Josiah had 6 boys, no girls. They would live in this room until they reached the age of 10, where they were sent to the boarding school. The boarding school system. This is really what our religion is. They didn't have to go too far away to send off to school. For several reasons, not all 6 boys lived within their own time. One reason being the oldest, Josiah IV, was 12 years older than his youngest brother, Arthur. And so by the time Arthur was in this room, Josiah had already moved out. The other reason, though, is that tragedy did strike this family on several occasions. The first time in February of 1843, 2 of the older boys, Edward and Hugh, were canoeing in the canal with their enslaved playmates, Anderson and Zacharias. An accident occurred in which the canoe capsized, and all 4 boys did drown. We see that not only did this deeply affect Mary, as well as the rest of the Collins family, but also the entire enslaved community. We see then 14 years later, another son, William Kent, is galloping his horse down the carriage trail when he is thrown into a tree. And he does pass away from those injuries. We see that his father, Josiah, is so particularly upset by this, he takes a large heavy chain and places it around the trunk of the tree in order to choke it out and kill it. Out of the 6 boys, the 3 that lived to adulthood are Josiah Collins IV, George, and Arthur. All 3 grew up, they received their education. They served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. And after the death of their father in 1863, they returned home with their mother after the war to try to help her settle the debts that she is left with. They are not able to do that, and the property is later sold in 1867.
That's huge. That's all we do.
You guys can walk up to the change, don't go past it, okay?
I think the children were receiving education here until they were 10 years old or something.
Perhaps a little bit, but not anything more than listening basics. Yeah. Alrighty. Yep, so that room down there was the boys' playroom. In the room in front of it would have been used as extra storage, as well as additional bed space for any children of guests that were staying here.
Neat little nook.
On this side lived the only non-family permanent resident of this household, and that was the nanny. The nanny was a free African-American woman named Charlotte Cabarrus. Charlotte was born into slavery, though. Her mother was enslaved, and her father was a wealthy white man who owned her mother. We do see that the 2 parents have a second child together, that is Charlotte's younger brother, Leon. And in 1808, Charlotte's father does decide to free the family. So that's Charlotte, her brother, her mother, and her grandmother. Afterwards, Charlotte receives an education where she learns to read and write as well as speak French. And she comes to work for the Collins family as their nanny in 1838. And her job is to watch over the boys until they're grown up. And while she receives room and board for this job, she also receives a salary of about $100 a year. And when the boys are all grown up and do not need a nanny anymore, the Collins family keep her on staff here as the head housekeeper. And when the boys no longer need their playroom, Charlotte writes a letter to Josiah asking if she could please move her room from this one here to the room down there because it had more natural lighting and she loved the fan window. He agreed, and that is the room where she passes away in 1860. And at the time of her death, she doesn't have a husband or any children, so we see just how much of her life was spent working for the family. Alright, we're gonna head back down to the 2nd floor.
Get back, boys.
Thank you, bud.
We're gonna have to get reminded every 5 seconds.
That is a tiny window in there.
No, it's already down.
They split the window, so this is a tiny little slit.
We are out here. Long way down. It's an old house. We've been in, of course, you guys too. George Washington's house.
Yeah.
Madison's house. It's bigger than yours.
Let's go.
It looks like a bathroom.
See what she says. Any guesses before I tell you?
A bathroom.
Not quite.
No.
How's your medicine
That's where I
cabinet?
store all their peppermints.
Peppermints.
I mean,
No, not
Seasonings.
peppermints.
I say it's medicine and seasoning.
Medicine, there we go. That's an answer that I think I can get behind. So this is a medicine cabinet. This- Yeah, this cabinet is used to store both medicines as well as extra medical equipment. It would be used both here in the family home as well as in the plantation hospital. The reason this cabinet is here on this porch is because it is kept out of sunlight at all points of the day. It also sits outside of 2 of the bedroom windows of Mary and Josiah's room, and so while it would have been kept under lock and
can we
key.
go in this?
No, sorry, I don't have the key for it.
That's the boss.
Yeah, my boss has the key for it. Yeah, and so while it was kept under lock and key, it was also kept under a close eye. But if a doctor was working within the family home, they could walk out that side door like we just did to access the medicine cabinet quickly. If they were working within the plantation hospital, they could use the outside staircase here to access the medicine without interrupting what was going on inside the family home.
I'm pretty sure that's all.
Kind of looks like that. Any questions? Alrighty, we're gonna head down using the outside staircase here.
By the way, your voices stay together.
I'm very glad. I can feel my throat get.
He lives here on the.
I don't know whose dog this is, to be honest.
Hi, buddy. How are you? Huh?
Friendly.
Yeah, friendly.
I like living here. Lots of property here.
This place is so cool. You know, I walked around it once before when Ryan and Dave were here. It wasn't open.
Oh, wow. Yeah, your house isn't that bad.
No, this has got some major.
Come on, buddy.
This one does not seem to have.
Hey. Come on.
Maybe we should just look on the corner.
Can we get up there? He's following Dad. He's Dad's best friend now. Yes, we are.
So, get this. They have a sand tiger shark there. The only sand tiger shark that they have at the aquarium, and her name is Big Mama.
Big Mama.
Big Mom.
We're gonna go see Big Mama on Thursday.
Last time I was there, I was 5.
And did you hear all the apples or something?
You can push it open if you'd like. Usually it's open. It's a little windy today, so it keeps blowing it back closed.
Okay, let's listen to see what this house was.
Alrighty. So a lot of what we do know about the enslaved community comes from documents prepared by individuals such as the Collins family, their neighbors, the Pettigrews, and individuals preparing tax documents and bills of sale. One document that we rely heavily on is an inventory taken of the enslaved community in 1843. That was taken as a result of the death of Josiah III, or not third, Josiah II in 1839. After his death, all of his property has to be divided up amongst his children, and this inventory was taken to aid in that process. So not only does this list the name of all of the enslaved individuals that were here, but also the building, and even down to which room they were living in. And so from that, we know that Judy and Lewis lived here with 4 out of 5 of their teenage children, their oldest adult son, Francis, his wife, Violet, and their infant son. And so altogether, that is 9 people living here in this one room. Only the adults would have gotten to sleep on beds, and they would have slept 2 per bed. Children and teenagers would have slept either on the floor or on straw mats on the floor, either down here or up in the loft. However, in the summer months, it does get incredibly hot up there with no way to ventilate it, and so living was moved
When
outside.
we're done down here, can we go up there?
We cannot go up there, unfortunately. It's roped off. Okay, off limits. And so, we also know Judy and Lewis were enslaved field hands. That meant that their day started before the sun rose. They'd get up, prepare themselves and their children for the day, as well as prepare a small breakfast. And then as the sun was rising, they would walk sometimes upwards of several miles to the field in which they were working in that day. They'd work from sunrise to sunset, which in the summer is up to 14 hours a day. And the only break they would get would be to eat lunch prepared by enslaved cooks in the enslaved kitchen. As the sun was setting, they would then walk those several miles back home, and once they arrived home, that's when all of the domestic chores began. Things like cleaning their home, cooking dinner, and tending to their garden all had to be done in the dark because their daylight hours belonged to the work of Josiah Collins. We also know that this family was impacted by that division of inheritance. One of Josiah III's younger sisters, Louisa, had just gotten married, and she planned to take her inheritance of 59 enslaved individuals from Somerset, as well as some enslaved individuals from other Collins property, to Alabama to start a plantation called Fonsdale. And so, of these individuals, that included Judy and Lewis and their 5 teenage children. And these individuals were forced to walk for 51 days from Somerset Place to Alabama. And this 9-person household was now only down to 3, leaving Frances, Violet, and their son behind. But this is not the only generation of this family forced to leave behind their home and their family. Judy's mother, a woman named Duca, was one of the 80 enslaved native West Africans brought to Somerset Place in 1786. And so she was forced to leave behind her home and her family as well. And so that's 3 generations of this family forced through 2 separate migrations, all in the name of slavery. No worries, no worries.
Sucky Davis.
Huh?
Sucky Davis is the name.
Very close.
Suki.
Suki, absolutely.
What's Suki?
Yeah. So, first thing to get out of the way is that even though this building is much larger than the building that we were just in, each room in this building is about the same size as the house that we were just in. And so each room here in this building served as a household for a large family. And so each room, more like an apartment than one big house. So we know from that inventory that the oldest individual living here in this building was a woman named Suki Davis. She's listed on the inventory as Old Suki for the room here above us. She also, we see Suki's name listed again here for this room, and that was her daughter Susan, who also went by Suki. And so we see the generations of this family separated by the term old, in comparison to the Collins family, separated by the first, the second, and the third. But a little bit more about Suki's story herself. Suki was purchased out of Edenton in 1786. At that time, she was 14 years old, and she was purchased for a price of £60. And depending on what the conversion rate is going for, depending on the day, that is over $10,000 in today's money. And so we see that her price is affected by the fact that she is an enslaved woman. Enslaved women tended to have higher value than enslaved men, because not only could they make money by working here on the property for their owners, but they also could provide monetary value by having children. At this time, any enslaved woman who had a child, that child was enslaved. It did not matter who the father was. But the same thing goes the other way. Any free woman that has a child, that child is free. It doesn't matter who the father is. We do see Suki has her first child at the age of 23 with a man named Dave Trotter. Dave is an enslaved man, but he is not owned by the Collins family. He is owned by their overseer here, Thomas Trotter. And so shortly after the birth of Suki and Dave's son, John, Thomas stops working here at Somerset Place, and he moves away, taking Dave with him. And so that small family is now separated. Suki does have a second partner in which she has 7 more children. And by the end of the Civil War, she has 131 descendants born into slavery here. And so we see for that one price of £60, the Collins family ultimately received 132 enslaved individuals. We also know that Suki outlived her working days, and we know that by this ledger entry that lists her as Old Suki, age 67, being worth absolutely $0. And so we see how she goes from being worth more here because she can work and have children, to now being worth nothing in the eyes of the Collins family because she can do neither of those things. And although she doesn't do any work that provides monetary value to the plantation, she does still work, and she provides childcare to the enslaved children here. And so while their families are forced to work during the day, she is watching over them, teaching them how to live life on the plantation, how to avoid being punished. She is passing on oral histories, stories of the early days of the plantation before the canal was dug. And she's passing on African and African American cultural traditions, things like arts, music, food waste, even taking items that can be grown or found here on the land and turning them into everyday household items. And she is assigning chores to the older children in order to prepare them for their working days. And so we see not only is she the matriarch of her own family, but also the matriarch of the enslaved community. Yes?
How did they get in the upper loft?
In the upper loft, there's a staircase in the hallway, and they would have used that to get up there.
They didn't see brother?
How old when the enslaved children started working?
So we see about the same time that the owner's children would start attending school, although some children might have started working as early as 8. Any other questions?
So is there 4 different rooms? Is this broken up into 4?
Yeah, so 2 rooms downstairs, 2 rooms upstairs. That would have been the same setup as down here.
Up to 9 people in each room.
So in this house, there were 26 in total, so between 5 and 7 per room here in this building. But depending on just how they were assigned, for any of the houses, between 5 to 15 for a room of this size.
Was there ever glass windows in here?
No, these all would have been
Like
windows
this?
such as this. Only the hospital would have had glass windows like that.
In the main building?
And the main buildings, yes.
I know back then winters were a lot colder than they are today.
Yes, and so the walls here are cypress. Cypress is known for its ability to absorb water, and so in the summer, the boards here would swell, not allowing any breeze really to pass through the walls. However, in the